Welcome to Streets to Sweets. Clap it up, clap it up. That's what I'm talking about. So excited to be here today and to welcome you all. We have a fabulous amount of presenters who are going to share some really insightful information with you. So stay tuned for that. Just to give you a little bit of background on who I am, my name is Morgan Naomi Matthews. I'm a certified DEI practitioner. I also am in event production. And I'm just super, super excited to be here to share all of my career experience and to hear from everyone that we have here as well. So let's hop into it if y'all are ready. I don't know. Clap it up if you're ready. You know, all right, all right, all right, all right. We're ready. We're ready to go. Okay. So first, we're going to go through the agenda really quickly. We have our networking and welcome that we just walked through today. We're going to do our speaker presentations, which y'all are going to love. Then we're going to go to a networking break. We also have some little snacks and bites for those who are here. If you're not here, just feel free to go to the bathroom, get some water, take a quick little break. And then after that, we're going to have a fireside chat. Well, we're going to have questions from you in the audience that you can ask directly to the speakers to get to know them better. And then closing, we're going to have a raffle where we got some prizes that we're going to give out to y'all. So get excited, get hyped. And without further ado, I am going to introduce our first speaker. Oh, these are all of our speakers, but I'm going, excuse me, but I'm going to introduce our first speaker, Monica.
Hey, everybody, thank you so much. I'm happy to be here with you. So the phone rang, cutting off sleep. I still remember the sound of the shrill, the ring, ring, ring. A phone ringing in the middle of the night could only mean one thing: something bad happened. I turned and I looked at the red eyes of the digital alarm clock looking back at me. It was right at that moment that I heard my mom scream, "Mo, wake up." I sat up and I could smell it before I could see it. Fire. Our neighbors had called us to tell us that the corner bodega, that bodega right there, was on fire. And my bedroom sat just 3 short floors above the blaze. See that air condition? That was my window. I didn't have an air conditioner back then, though. And at that point, I had never even lit a match before. So the fact that there was fire climbing up my building had me shook. I tossed on my clothes and I run to my mother's bedroom. And I'm surprised because she's more panicked than I am. So pulling it together, I'm like, "Ma, you gotta calm down. Ma, put on some pants, your culo's hanging out. Ma, please. All right, we gotta open up the fire escape gate, lift up the latch. Ma, please get out of the way, I'll do it. Ma, please stop crying. We gotta go." Eventually, we made our way down that fire escape and into the crisp, cool air of the Bronx night. I remember because we didn't have time to grab jackets. A few hours later, I sat in the classroom of my very white Catholic school, and nobody had suspected a thing. And I did this thing where I was kind of like low key trying to sniff the lapels of my navy blue blazer. And I wondered, can they smell it? Did the smoke and the fire seep into the fabric of my blazer? Was it on my skin? I guess nobody could tell because everybody moved around in their own worlds like nothing had happened, not suspecting a thing. My mom had this saying, never air your dirty laundry in public. So I sat there like a diary, quiet as kept, holding on to the secret. I was 12 years old. Now, it's a funny thing that day. I remember looking around the room and thinking, wow, they move around with such ease. And I wanted that ease. I wanted to know what that ease felt like. So I tried to be like them. I would spend time in their neighborhoods because they weren't coming to mine. I tried to dress like them. I convinced my mom to buy me these khaki pants with these front pleats that they all wore. Thick thighs and a big ass should never wear front pleats, but here I was, trying so desperately to look like them. I tried to get my curly hair to look like them. I'd buy all these products in my allowance, and it never worked. But I wanted the ease of not having a decision to be bigger than do I use gel or hairspray. Now, I don't know if anybody's ever lived with these dual identities, but this was my experience, and it can be completely exhausting. And so, all through college and well into my life in corporate America, I oscillated between these two worlds. I had door knockers and Timbs on my feet when I was on the block. I had a red plaid skirt and leather shoes when I was at school. Hip hop at home, rock music with the other kids. And so it kind of felt like Clark Kent when he steps inside the phone booth and he comes like Superman. Like you're constantly changing outfits, you're changing identities. And all I really wanted was that ease that they had. So when I got to corporate America, if you called me like my friends did, they'd hear a voicemail that kind of sounded something like this. You've reached Monica. I'm unable to answer the phone right now. And they would laugh and leave messages saying, who the fuck is that person? But they didn't understand it. They hadn't had to spend time in these white worlds trying to assimilate. And they didn't know anything about the ease. Do you know that I actually took tap dancing lessons? That's not a metaphor. I actually tried to learn how to tap dance just so I could fit in. And so I bought a Groupon of 10 classes because my coworkers were doing it. And I was 2 classes in and about 2,000 shuffle steps before I was like, what am I doing? This was not the ease that I wanted. But do you know what those classes taught me? That the ease that I was looking for was to show up in spaces exactly like myself. Not fragments of me, but as my whole self. See, I thought that I just ran from the fire that night when I was 12 years old. But the truth is, I had been running from that fire every night since. But what I got wrong is that the fire did get into my pores. It never fully extinguished because the embers are still inside me. And if you look really closely and you squint, you'll see it inside the stories that I share and the communities I build, where the only requirement is to be unapologetically you. So when I'm asked to speak about ditching fears and breaking through mental barriers, I can do that because I've done it before, and I will continue to do it again. Because fear isn't something you only feel one time. Fear is something you feel, but you learn how to overcome. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So this is a little bit about me. It's kind of like that resume when you go out on a first date and you meet somebody and you say only the good parts, right? And you're not really talking about the messy middle. So I could tell you that I'm a marketer. I could tell you I have my own business, call you wanna do what. I'm a TEDx speaker, all that, but I'm always gonna represent that I'm first gen from LeBron. But I wanna tell you about that messy middle. So let's think about behind the bio, what that timeline looks like. And I used emojis because we all know emojis. We all speak emoji language. So the first 5 years out of school, it was great. I was excited. It was the most money that I ever made before. I was a young whippersnapper ready to go and climb that corporate ladder. And after 5 years, I moved on to a different role. And you can see there, I started to really feel pain. And those tears, they're not just a metaphor. I would cry tears because I really hated at that point what I was doing. I felt so disconnected from my purpose and my profession, and it was a struggle. And then I moved on. And years 8 to 12, it was apathy. I wasn't happy, I wasn't sad, but I said, well, it's called work, it's not called fun. So I just kind of rode that wave. And then around year 15, I started to feel discontentment. It started to feel like I was wearing clothes that didn't fit any longer. And I knew I had to make a change. And I share this because all those things on the bio that come after marketer happened after I got over my fear. After I became so uncomfortable with my current situation that I knew I needed to change it. And so that's the beauty. It doesn't matter how long your journey has been, there's always an opportunity to change it and have something different. So what exactly changed? What was the difference? The difference was this: my mindset. My mindset completely changed. I went from someone who was happy to crying to apathetic to discontent to someone that became empowered. But how did I do that? And it began with the realization that I get to choose my thoughts. Circumstances, the external events, the systemic oppression, all the external things that we have to work against are always going to be there. But the one thing that I can always control is how I view it. So let's get into it. 99% of the people in this world are convinced they're incapable of achieving great things, so they aim for the mediocre. I don't know what you think when you hear this quote, but that makes me sad. That makes me angry. That makes me feel like I want to shake people and individually tell them that they are capable of so much more. And do not settle for mediocre, because ain't shit fun about mediocres. So now let's look at this. I'm going to go up through 4 steps. I call it the R4 method, and it's for reframing your thoughts. And the very first thing you want to do is recognize the thought. What is the thought that you're having? Is it, I hate this job? Is it, I can't do this anymore? Is it, I don't want my life to be like this? I can't believe I ended up here? Identify the thought. The first thing is to recognize it. Once you're able to recognize it, you have an opportunity to stop it. Because what happens is we get the thought and then we keep running with the thought. And it becomes this tiny little snowball until it's a big avalanche. And so right at that first step, we want to recognize it. The next thing we want to do is relate it to our experience. Where is this thought coming from? And it's all connected to something else. If you think that $20 is a lot of money, $20 is a lot of money because something in your biography has told you that it's a lot of money. Someone else has told you that it's a lot of money. And you've adopted that idea and you've accepted it as truth. But is that really the truth? So I want you to recognize it and then identify what part of you it's actually coming from. Because every single thought, from what you chose to wear today to how you chose to walk here, every single thing is determined by your thoughts, either consciously or subconscious. And we want you to be very conscious about everything you're thinking and everything you're doing. The next step after that is we want to remove the feeling. So if it's, I hate my job, or I don't make enough money, when we remove the feeling, the answer becomes, my current role is not the one for me. Very neutral. I know I no longer want to be in this position. It's neutral. We're not putting any emotions to it. If we say, I am always going to be broke, the answer is right now, I have X amount of money in the bank. And maybe the answer is right now, I have 0 in the bank. But you're removing the emotion from it because the emotion is what gets us riled up, right? You saw this today and you came because there was an emotion attached to what you read. It either got you excited, it got you curious, it got you interested, but the emotion is what put your body in this seat today. So we want to go and remove the feeling and make sure that it's neutral. And then last, we want to reach for a new thought. You get to choose what your thought is going to be. So you can say, I am so motivated to find a new job. I am so determined to connect with 3 people in this room today and tell them what I do. But you get an opportunity to choose the new thought. And at first, this is difficult. It takes some time. It takes a little practice. You might say, there's no way I could change my whole life simply by changing my thoughts. But you are with yourself every day, all day, thinking all these thoughts. What if you decided to choose something else? What if you decided, instead of believing what people have taught us, that this isn't for us, that we're not designed to get to that level, you start believing that you are made for it. The difference between a good life and a bad life is how well you walk through the fire. So take action as the antidote of fear and put in your mind, like that fire, all you do is shine. Thank you.
Monica, that was amazing. And I am going to continue to shine thanks to you, girl. Okay, next up, we have Gashard, who's going to come up and talk to us about microaggressions. Clap it up for Gashard.
All right. Thanks so much, Morgan. It's going to be hard to top that, Monica. But I think what I'm talking about is such a great build and connection to Monica's words. And I'm happy to be with you all here today to present Reframe to Reclaim. So Uh, my name is Gashard Reven. I am a DEI professional, 8 years of experience in HR, DEI realm, pronouns he, him. And I, similar to Monica, I have these lists of accolades, but on the surface, they seem like LinkedIn. You see it and you're like, oh, wow, NYU graduate, two-time graduate, writer, published poet. I'm really excited about those things. And, I think even when I think back about my graduation, I wanted to Dougie across the stage. I may be dating myself. I don't think the Dougies are dance people do anymore, but this was me. This was me when I was graduating. But at the same time, I had these deeper thoughts. And, I think about Michelle Obama's quote, and I think about how she said, the world won't always see you in these caps and gowns. They won't know how hard you worked and how much you sacrificed to make it to this day. Instead, they'll make those assumptions. And here I am talking about microaggressions with you today. And a part of why microaggressions exist is because of assumptions someone might make about who you are, where you come from. They run the gamut. And I think, you know, even when I think about graduation and I think about the speaker that we had there, who was the chaplain of the Islamic Center for NYU, he spoke about a lot of microaggressions he experienced as someone practicing his faith, as someone who worked very closely with 9/11 victims, and sort of think about those microaggressions, even reaching that stature in his career, makes me think a lot about where did it start for me when I think about the microaggressions that I experienced. It goes all the way back to NYU, my first year there, undergraduate student, just excited to be in that environment. And I think back to like a very particular scenario where I'm sitting there with a classmate. We're talking about, oh, where did our friends from high school end up going? Where do we all end up? And very matter of factly, this person mentioned in the conversation that, yeah, one of my friends went to Harvard. We're really excited for her, but at the same time, we know she only got into it because she was Black. And I was just so taken aback. I never really heard anyone say something like this at the time. I really didn't even know how to respond. And it really made me think about this image here, at least how I interpret it, as someone like almost choking on their words, almost like can't see where those thoughts might have sprung from. And it was just really difficult. And even though that wasn't about me, it made me sort of internalize what someone may have thought about me. Like, did other people think I belonged at NYU? Like, it's a predominantly white institution, and there's not a lot of people who are of color that go there. So it was difficult, and it started to shape, even at that early stage, how I thought about my experiences, how I moved in those classrooms, things of that nature. So I think what this prompted me to do is learn more about what was I experiencing. What are microaggressions? I didn't even know the term at the time. This is a very scholarly definition, but just to ground on what a microaggression is for those who don't know, it's those everyday slights and dignities, put downs that you might experience, and some can be subtle, some can be overt, and I won't necessarily go through this whole list. I speak a lot about this in some of my writings and things of that nature, but they can be invalidations, they can be assaults, and sometimes it's not even words. Sometimes it's just behaviors and how someone treats you. So all of those, you may think at a surface level, oh, I'll just brush that off, but they can build up over time, and they actually do have research, and this research is continuing to build, where they actually have an impact on you physically, from headaches, high blood pressure, to difficulty sleeping, how it impacts your mood. All of these are things that, as you continue to experience those everyday slights, they actually add up. One, you may say, oh, I can brush that off, but multiple over the course of your career, over the course of your higher education, whatever it may be, those all play a role and they impact you. And I think it's really important, especially for this audience, whether you're someone who is just entering the workforce, whether you're someone entering a new company, or thinking about what to consider, I think this people are really uh, anxious when it comes to microaggressions, and more people were able to speak out when we shifted sort of that uh, from the remote role for a lot of people to going back into the office. People realize actually when I was in that physical space, there were a lot of things I experienced that I didn't have to the same way when I was working virtual. Maybe I didn't have those same like coffee chats, water cooler talks, or whatever it is. So it's a real topic, and it's something that we all have to keep in mind. So this really brings me to how I was entering the workforce and what I had to do. So right here, when thinking about when I graduated, like I said, I was happy, but there were a lot of emotions that were taking place at the same time when I first graduated. From my first experience outside of higher ed was actually working a front desk job at a hotel. I had that expensive undergrad degree, and I needed to find ways to pay that off. I didn't have health insurance of my own, and really, it was a multitude of things I was experiencing, from feeling like a failure, feeling like disappointed my parents, to did I live up to my potential? But I put all that weight on my shoulder so early on, and really to get to where I am today, that brings me back to reframing to reclaiming. I had to think, okay, what can I do right now? What small steps can I take to actually get to where I want to be, rather than thinking all at once, like, okay, my life is over. Like, I didn't do what I should have done to get to where I want to be. But like taking a step back, my journey just started. So even that was a quick reframe I had to do to actually get to where I'm at now, where I'm comfortable in my salary. I'm in a role that I really aligns to what I want to do. For hopefully the next few years, and I think it starts with those small steps, and I'll take you through a couple of those. But before I do that, I'm wondering who has heard or experienced some of these microaggressions that are on the screen now. Some of these may not be new to you, and I can see a few people already saying like these are things that maybe they heard said to someone else, but the fact that other people have had this experience means that they probably have impacted you in similar ways of how they impacted me. Again, everyone experiences something differently, but whether you know it or not, you may have internalized it in some way. So this is my first step of how I reframe to really reclaim when I think about a self affirmation. This is something I tell myself, but everyone, I encourage you to come up with your own affirmation, your own mantra, stick it on a board, stick it on your wall, put it on your phone, wherever you want to put it to reground you when you experience something that tries to tell you you're the less than, tell you that you don't belong in these spaces, whatever it is. You uh, have the power to actually take it on and say, actually, you know what? I know what I am. Don't worry about what other people are saying. And again, I work in the DEI space because I do understand there's still systemic changes. There's still policies and things that need to take place that, people need to do to actually improve systems. But right here, I'm here to tell you about what you yourself can do in your power. So I think for me, this is a powerful one that I try to remind myself to say every day. My race does not define my diction or eloquence. I'm a wealth of knowledge, continuously pouring into myself, and I'm worthy of my voice. And this really stems from, you know, oh, you're so articulate for such and such or that. Like getting that a lot throughout my higher ed and my career. I have to reground, and that's something for me. So whatever it is for you, you'll have to go through that process of thinking about what will reground you. Um, so transitioning into that, what are the 8 steps? Of course, this is not an all how-to guide. It's each step will have more details behind it, but this is a good starting place to have you start to think about, get into the process of how do I train my mind to consider what on my journey I need to do to reframe experiences, because we all have our own story, our own personal experiences that we went through. So I want to take you through some of the steps that have helped me. Hopefully, they're helpful for you as well. I think the first step I always think of, and these are in no particular order, is make the space to process and validate your emotions. I think that's always going to be the important keys. I go back to you may experience these microaggressions and brush them to the side, but are you actually thinking about what happened? I can think back to times where I was called the name of the other black person in the office when there's only one other black person, and initially I'm like, all right, that's not a big deal. Like, I'll leave that alone. But actually, when you dig deeper, okay, what happened? Why didn't I call that out? Why did no one else call that out? What do I do with this new emotion that gave me? And how might I respond differently next time this happens? All that will be a part of processing it and determining what really is your strategy when some of these things happen. And sometimes it's just feeling what you felt in that moment. I'm angry. I'm actually hurt by that, and that's part of processing as well. Next piece for me is find community and leverage it as a safe space. So I'm a little biased as someone who's in DEI right now. My main role is building out employee resource groups. They are such a pivotal part, and I speak a lot. I can't give all the how tos in this talk today, but how to even find companies with authentic employee resource groups that actually want to push forward agendas, want to create safe spaces. I think that's a big piece. But first and foremost, just looking, is there a community that exists at your company that you can leverage where people look like you, people will validate rather than invalidate, something you might experience in a meeting or what have you. These communities don't necessarily have to be inside internally at your company, but I think it's always a great place to start because then you can start to talk about policy shifts. You can start to talk about who can be a mentor internally for you. I think all those are good pieces to think about. So next on the list is explore opportunities to amplify your voice and your experiences. So I think big for this is tying that to employee resource groups. For those who don't know what employee resource groups are, they're typically focused on uh, particular underserved community or identity where you have these opportunities to either um, help plan events, help think about what are our goals for DEI for the industry or company. All those are some of the things that ERGs might do. But I think when you think about how you can actually get your experiences out there, employee resource groups are a great place to start because now, you may, if you're comfortable, speak about a microaggression or something that happened in your team or the workplace. And if other people didn't know that this is something they should consider or recognize, it may help to start to organically, improve the culture or have people think about inclusivity in a different way. So that's really just a jumping off point. There are many ways to amplify voices, but I think the more you can get in touch with people who are having those same experiences, you build community, you start to cascade and amplify those messages, and you start to rally behind sort of what do we need to do to improve the culture. So it's almost reframing, thinking, okay, I'm stuck, I don't know where to go, I don't know what to do with what I just experienced, but like, how can, with knowing what I know right now, leverage who's around me, leverage who else might have resources depending on their seniority, depending on things like that, and then going from there. Next is harness the power of self-affirmations and affirm others to foster inclusion. So I spoke a little bit already about self-affirming and thinking of your own mantra and, what is important for you to reground yourself in. But I think even exemplifying this and organically doing it can help shift those cultures too, whether it's maybe there's someone on your team who did a great job on a project, but they didn't get the visibility they should have, calling them out in a team meeting and saying, you know what, so-and-so did so well. I just want to do a quick shout out for how much went into that. And these are small ways off the top of my head, but they make a big impact. A lot of things, especially when you think about the corporate world, it's going to be about visibility. Who knows what you're doing, And I think organically, changing the wheels of other people and say, actually, I didn't know that so-and-so did that much work. Let me think about them next time when thinking about who to give praise or when performance review time comes up. So that's one way to start to exemplify those changes, not only for yourself, but how am I getting other people, maybe from my community, who may not get as much shout outs involved. Track and measure your success. This is not only important just overall in terms of your career, But I think this is also a way of reframing when something happens to you. Okay, how am I going to tell myself, actually, I know what I can do? I actually have this list of everything I've done from since I started here. It'll be so easy for me to say, no, I should be confident. I've done this, this, and this. I've tracked these changes that I was able to make, and the impact is there. So if someone says something, not only is that important for when you think about your performance and when it comes time for review season, but also just your everyday life, reminding yourself what are you actually capable of, what you've accomplished, and then you can set your goals from there to continue to build and grow and develop. Identify leaders that are willing to sponsor your success. So I think we speak a lot about mentorship in general, but sponsorship sometimes has that added benefit. You may find sponsors in your employee resource groups. You might find them just through organic mentorship opportunities, but sponsorship really has that benefit of making sure you're brought to the next level of your career, typically by senior executives or senior leaders who already have the ears of people around them. So you want to make sure that you're getting the visibility that others might get. And I think that's a great way to think about, how do I take what I have in my wheelhouse and make sure other people know about it. Understand the resources at your disposal. So this was a really big one for me in terms of when I thought about uh, the times where I was stuck, truthfully, and what I needed to do to get unstuck. Sometimes even being able to uh, look at your workplace and say, okay, these are the things that I know that they offer, from whether it's therapy or whether it's some type of therapy benefits that are already part of the benefits package, or even a bias hotline. You want to make sure you are thinking about this proactively, because it may be difficult. Let's say you experienced something that was a big act of exclusion. At that time, it may be more difficult to think through that logically if you're already in the moment of experiencing it. So make sure you try to gather those resources proactively when possible, and determine for you, it's a decision for yourself. Do I need therapy? Do I need additional help for some of the things I experience to be able to help process? Some people are able to process on their own and figure out what they need to get to the next level, and reframe what they've experienced, but some people may need that additional help. Last is, find your outlet that allows you to disconnect, decompress. And for me, that's writing. For me, that's poetry and basketball. Everyone's going to have an outlet that looks different for them. And I think part of this is also when we work at these companies, or we work in a society where you feel like you always have to be where you always have to be, executing on something. I think it's just as important to find time to rest. And, a rested mind is one that's going to have the most insight. And I think that's something important to remember as well. So when you're thinking through all these things, I think make sure you don't forget the important step of, don't be overwhelmed, don't overthink, and just take some time. You're gonna need to process. You're gonna need to think through what framework works for you. You're gonna need to think about, what affirmations do I want to give myself, because that's a form of self-love. And I think all of that will, really impact where you can go, and it'll most likely not only impact, where you go in your career, but also how you carry yourself in certain rooms or in certain environments. And then that will help your mental health and mental wellness. So these are my steps. Hopefully they are beneficial to you. And just leave you off with a quote here. You are worthy beyond measure. You're shattering glass ceilings and opening doors you were never given keys to. Thank you for your time. You can follow me on Instagram if you want to hear more about affirmations, some of the ones I speak about, and appreciate you spending this time with us.
Thank you so much, Kishar. I have to get my affirmations game stepped up. Like, the affirmation you wrote was so beautiful. And reclaim and reframe. I think it's really important that we're here today and that you're here today, because you can reclaim the power and control that you have over your career and your future job opportunities. And with that, I'm going to introduce our next speaker, the mastermind behind this entire event from Streets to Suites. Kae-san, come on up here.
Thank you. So you think about this idea, and we've heard these great themes, this idea that you work through your mindset and you get through your fears. You reframe to reclaim not only your work, but yourself. And that sets me up well for what I'm going to talk to you all about is this idea of getting unstuck. So if you want to have a meaningful and fulfilling career in life, at the end of the day, all you have to do is design it. So you got to ask yourself, how do I go about doing that? And that really is the $1 million question. It's all about how do you figure out what is next and what will get you unstuck? Is it more money that'll get you unstuck? Is it more meaning and impact? Maybe you want more flexibility in your work. Or maybe it's something else. You have to ask yourself these questions. And what I'm here today to help you with is help you figure out where you're going to go next and how you're going to go about doing that. So a little bit about me. This is the rap sheet like everyone has spoken to, Bronx born and raised, and I'm a skills nerd. I've made a very, very nice career for myself out of thinking about skills and thinking about how do people do better at work and even in life outside of work. That's led me to a role as a Fortune 100 executive. I'm also a certified career and life design strategist. And that's allowed me to do a lot of different things. But one of my favorite jobs is being a girl dad. I have 4 beautiful, beautiful, beautiful daughters. But in this journey, that's allowed me in this time to make 9 strategic promotions, redesign my career using this narrative of learning and skills over 7 times across 5 different industry sectors, all while running 3 different businesses outside of that work. So this is why I'm here with you today to really just talk about what's the current state of work life right now? What is this normal? And these are the real facts. Right now, a lot of people spend a lot of time working, up to 80,000 to 125,000 hours working. Do you know that's 33 years of your life? 33 years. So you got to ask yourself, what do you want to do with that time? But when you think about it, only a few years from now, research says that over 50% of people need to learn new skills. We're in 2022, 2025. Half your skills that you have are going to be irrelevant. So when you think about that, though, the next challenge is that more than 61% of people said they don't have time to upskill or reskill. And that's a problem. And what's happening as a result? In the US, more than 69% of folks in work right now are disengaged. Globally, it's even higher at 80%. And with all that being said, you all have heard of the Great Resignation. And those numbers are looking crazy too right now, with more than 40% of people actively in work either saying they will quit and move to another job, or they're actually doing it. So you got to ask yourself, what does that tell us? That tells us that change is our only constant. And you have to do something differently. We have to think about our careers differently and the idea of careers. And so what I want to do before I get into talking about how to get unstuck is I want to give you guys a framework about the journey of what Career 1.0 is to where we are right now, which is Career 4.0. So when you think about Career 1.0, that happened from the 50s to the 80s. That basically was the idea that you wait your turn. You work in one place, you do a good job, you keep your head down, and if you're lucky, you get to management or you get to the role that you want. And that's even harder for our communities. But that was the typical timeline for folks. So when you move to Career 2.0, the 80s and 90s, it's a different narrative. It's like now you manage your own career. Back in the day, the company took care of you for doing hard work. In the 90s, it was like you have to go do it yourself. And how did people do that? That's when LinkedIn popped up. That's when other platforms started popping up. That's when people started moving to their own jobs or jumping to new companies to get to that next level. And right now, we're really in the thick of this idea of the 3.0, which is how do you grow your career through different experiences? So it's not just about hey, I want this job title. It's about, does my work give me meaning? Does it impact me? What's my purpose in that work? But what I'm here to tell you is really the next wave is this idea of the 4.0, which is skills being your new currency. Right now, it's going to be less about whether you have the fancy degree, whether you have the fancy job title. It's going to be about, can you do the work? Can you show me that you can do the work? And now more than ever, we have the agency to do that. We can share our own portfolios online. We can learn through lots of different avenues in order to move forward. And skills are truly the new currency, and it's going to be that way going forward. So if you take anything away from this section, 1.0 and 2.0 are dead. 3.0 and 4.0, that's the new fire right now. And this is happening right now. So with that being said, you can't just wish your way to a 4.0 mindset to get unstuck. You got to build your way forward. That's the only way you can do it now. And the way I propose you doing that, and again, as Gishard said in his section, I have 4 stages that work for me. The first stage is this idea of defining your destination. The challenge with a lot of professionals in today's world is that we often go down the paths or live the dreams of others. We very rarely take the time to figure out what we want to do. And that's why it's very, very important to define, based on your values, your work view, and your life view, where you want to go next. And once you do that, you start to discover pathways. And what I mean by pathways is that you talk to people. Once you have an idea of where you are and an idea of where you want to go based on what you value, you find others. You find communities of practice. You have curious conversations. And as you have those conversations, what you start to realize is that there are commonalities, things that connect with you, or it'll tell you that this doesn't work for me. And that's why you have to discover those pathways by getting curious and speaking to others and figuring out your next stage. Once you're able to do that, the next stage is actually, let me go back one, is to fuel your strategy. Because by having those conversations, now you're moving to a point of, how do I make these moves? What are the skills that I need? Do I need to go back and get education? Do I need to just try a new job? Or maybe do I need to work at another company? And that's when you figure out your how. You put the gas in your car, so you figure out where you're going to go. And the beauty here is that you can do that in the job that you're in. You can do that volunteering in other ways. There's lots of ways you can do and learn and fuel your strategies going forward. You're not just stuck in the work that you do. And then the last stage is you have to take action, period. If you don't act, you won't move forward. And through action, you're able to accelerate your strategy and understand what's working for you, what's not working for you. So that experimenting and acting is very, very critical because it informs your perspective. So to summarize the 4 stages, it's all about figuring out your destination. It's all about outlining what paths based on having really good conversations. It's about fueling your strategy. And then lastly, you have to accelerate. You have to put the pedal on the gas once you know what your strategy is. It's not about being successful. It's just about doing the work and trying stuff and giving yourself your space to do that. So when you think about this in this way. You're looking at what you do well, right? And then you're thinking about, what do you want to do? And then the third thing you look at is, what can I be paid to do? And when you look at all 3 of these things, there are some intersections. Now, if you go to the far right and you realize there are things that overlap there, this is good. You can get paid to do that. But I would say, learn to say no. Because the problem here is that you're sticking yourself in the spaces that you're familiar with. You can do it well and you can be paid to do it, but is it really what you want to do? Once you move past that and you get more to that bottom section where there's an overlay between what you want to do and what you can be paid to do, now this is where you double down and you learn to get really, really good at those things. This is where the experimenting happens, the trying stuff happens, right? Now, if you go to the far left and there are things that you can do well and you actually want to do them, These are the things that you monetize. And you go out there and you make money, because the goal right now is to have as many streams as you can, is to have a portfolio of things that can make you the living that you want to do. Because in a post-pandemic world, the one thing that's consistent is that your fancy job and your fancy title is not going to keep you sustainable. You have to do things that mean something to you, and you have to try different things. So when you think about those three sections, really the golden spot is that middle. If you can get into that middle target, that's the intersection of all the things that matter. What you want, what you do well, what you want to do, and what you can actually get paid to do. And that ultimately keeps you happy and unstuck. So this may look like something that one of my daughters has drawn. I know it's crazy, it's scribbles, right? But let me show you something. This right here is the first part of my career. So I moved in a very linear fashion, going up from undergraduate studies into luxury marketing, into graduate studies, into management consulting. And then I hit a ceiling and I started thinking about things a little bit differently. So I started contracting. I started my own business. I started working for professional services. And then I hit a point where I went into tech. And that technology point then allowed me to springboard into all these other things that I'm doing right now. So when I talked about doing, jumping 5 sectors, getting 9 promotions, I focus on leadership development, personal branding, thought leadership, life coaching. I recently became a board member. I do consulting. I'm public speaking to you guys today. And there are still some other things that I want to do going forward. And the beauty of that here is that when you're in this 4.0 world, you take the skills you have and you start trying to do new things. And that will help you figure out what's next. So if you remember anything, you just have to remember that you can't just wish forward. You have to get unstuck. And when you do that, you become unstoppable. And your skills are the new currency for doing that. Thank you very much.
If y'all aren't ready to act, I don't know what you've been doing, because I'm ready to get up and accelerate. Thank you so much, Kason. That was amazing. And next up, we have a fabulous speaker as well. We have Karel joining us to the stage. Everyone give her a round of applause. Thank you, Morgan, and thank you everybody that's here joining us today. So I want to start by introducing myself. My name is Karel Gordon, and I purposely didn't put my resume up, but I do want to say that I'm currently a marketing director. And I want to start by sharing my background. So I'm an immigrant. Any immigrants in the room? Okay, a few. So I think that's important, because when you're an immigrant, you're coming to this country and you're told, be grateful. We made it. We're here. And just be happy with what you have. And so today I'm talking about taking control of your life. And so for me, I'm grateful for my parents. Parents, if you're watching, I'm happy. Thank you for everything that you've taught me and poured into me. But I had to break through sort of that limiting mindset of just being happy with what I have and being grateful for where I am. And so I grew up in Miami, Florida, and every single family there, I feel like anybody that I knew was immigrants or children of immigrants. And so the mindset, everybody was around me, had the same exact mindset of be grateful for what you have. And to me, that also included money. And that's what I want to talk to you about today, how I increased the money in my pocket. So I went to a high school that I had to apply to get into, and my major was nursing. And so this is, if you think about it, I was in middle school where I had to decide what I wanted to do for high school, which impacts on what you're actually doing in college. I was so young, and so I chose nursing, and I liked science randomly. I like science and math. So I chose nursing, and we had college books, and I don't know, like that's all I knew. So then in college, I did a biology for my bachelor's degree, and it's what I knew, but it wasn't necessarily what I liked. And so for me, what I thought through was, do I want to sit in a lab? I'm very outgoing, I'm very talkative, and I'm just like, is this all that I have? And then so today I'm a marketing director, and I want to say, like, that's a huge difference. Nursing,
bachelor's in biology, and now I'm a marketing director. And it's like, how the hell did I get here today? So I thought back, and I want to talk about one specific situation on how I created this jump. And so I was a contractor in April 2018, and I got this contract in marketing events. And specifically, like I thought through, okay, how do I do this? How do I change from where I'm at? What do I want to do? I want something completely different. And I found a company called Creative Circle. And I don't know if you guys know it, but basically it's a company that you go and you apply for roles that you think you can do. And I found a role that I had a little bit of experience in. And the title specifically is Marketing Events Coordinator. And it was for 20 hours a week. And for me, obviously you want more money and you want to, just maximize your time there. And it was only 20 hours, but I applied. And let me tell you specifically, I looked at it. It was a fintech company. It was something completely different than I had ever done. And I researched the people who work there. And I was like, ooh, I kind of want to work in this realm. And when I got into this role, I thought through those things. Fast forward to June 2018, I got a full-time role at that exact company as a marketing project manager, full-time, 40 hours a week. And I specifically thought through that title. If you guys can research how much you make as a project manager, your salary completely jumps. And specifically, I increased my salary by 168% in 3 months. I want to talk through how I did that. So I went from a contractor to perm. And so first what I did was I made connections. I got into the space and I figured out who was who and I made friends. So the COO, the CEO, I made friends with them. I had conversations and I decided, I'm like, what do you guys want? What do they want in this role? And rewinding a little bit, when I took the contracting position, the person that was leaving the role, he was going to another company and I sat down with him. I had the opportunity to do an overlap. I sat down with him and picked his brain. And I think this is something that you need to do. So he was one of the connections that I made. So when I got into the role, I had free game, right? He sat me down. I mean, down to even like, don't talk in this conference room because it's connected to this one and everybody can hear what you're saying. Things like that you have to understand, and does your manager care about you showing up early or staying late? Things like that. So I made the right connections and I asked the right questions and I made sure to do, so basically I did my homework. Do your homework, understand what they're looking for, understand what role, where is the company going? And I think a lot of times when you get into positions, you have to think big. There's a popular TikTok, I won't say what it says, but you got to think big. Don't think small. But do your homework. And I think a lot of times don't only think about your role, but remember how it impacts the bigger goals of the company. Be essential. I'm always essential. Like, listen, every single role that I ever have, I will tell you that they will say, I can't get rid of this girl because she has become essential to the business. I know things that my manager doesn't know. They don't even know what I do, even today. So manager, if you watch it, what's up? They don't know what I'm doing. But in this particular role, I remember the person that I took over for, I took his he gave me all of the things, the spreadsheets and the logins. To this day, people probably would text me today asking to log in from this company because I'm essential. And I would say, be essential. Be responsive. This is huge. And this is something that I learned. 24-hour. I suggest 24-hour response time. If someone sends you an email and you don't have something to send right back, you say, hey, thank you for this email. I'll get back to you. A lot of people are not responsive, especially even in the business that I work at currently today. They are not responsive. And if I had to pick one that's number one, it's this one. The next thing is know your manager. Speak to them. Set one-on-one meetings. In this specific, how I jumped, I set one-on-ones with my manager. She was located in California, and I made sure to pick a time that worked for her. And I sat down with her and I said, how's it going? I ask questions. Sometimes these are uncomfortable questions, but you have to understand like what you need to change in order to do better in your role. And then I stayed focused. And I am type A. I'm an Aries. I really like sat down and I made Aries. Crap. No, but I made a plan and I stayed focused. And to be honest, when I put this together to think through what I wanted to talk about, I think it's very important to talk about the money aspect. And I think in order to change and take control of your life, money is a part of it, right? And so when I was building out my plan at the contracting role, thinking through like, okay, how am I going to get from point A to point B? Looking back, it felt forever, but it was only 3 months, right? And I had all these conversations. All of this was a roadmap, and I stayed focused. And I didn't just show up at work the first week early, to be with my manager. I stayed focused for 3 months. I did this. And I had the conversations even with the agency. And specifically, when you come in through an agency, kind of like Creative Circle, the company has to buy you out. So I wasn't cheap, y'all. I wasn't cheap. Like they had to pay for me. And it's because I was essential. They said, I have to pay for this girl to get her out of this. And this is the example I wanted to share today because it was something that I really took control, and it's the first step into digital marketing. Because I didn't even have that background. I started as a nursing major, and then I went to biology, and then I did events, and then I said, oh, I'm in experiential marketing, which it is. But the reality is now I'm a digital marketer. I can work from anywhere around the world. I've, spent 2 months in the last 5 working from Europe on different time zones because I'm a digital marketer and because I took control of my life. And I will say specifically took control of the salary that I wanted to have. And I did my research, and I think that you should do the same. I think this is one specific example, but there's many ways that you can make a blueprint, make a roadmap to achieve whatever you want to achieve. Thank you. Good job.
Awesome. And we are back to From Streets to Suites. Everybody clap it up. That was amazing getting to network and getting to know some of you in the room. I hope that we can continue to chat later. But what we're going to do now is we're going to have a fireside chat with all of our lovely speakers. And so we wanted y'all to ask us questions. But before we get into that, we wanted to talk a little bit about how you turn your network into your net worth. Let's be real. At the end of the day, we all want to secure the bag. We all want to make sure that we have money in our pockets to live our lives the way we would like to live them. But in order to do that, it requires some type of expertise, and that expertise is around networking. So I wanted to ask all of you, and feel free to answer in any order you'd like, but how did you leverage your network in order to improve your net worth within your career?
Thank you. I think one of the things you should think about in relation to a network is defining it. There's a difference between networking and building a network. So one of the things that I've done is be very intentional about understanding what my network looks like, depending on what I want to do, whether it's career related and in my current profession, whether it's something else that I want to try or experiment with. It's really looking at like, who do I know in these spaces, or who do I need to know? And then once you have that understanding, then it's about getting out there and actually doing the networking, which is the action, whether it's showing up to like an event or having that conversation. I'll talk more about what I mean by like conversation, but that's the foundation of it for me that has made me successful in that regard, is thinking about what kind of network I want to build for that purpose. And it's okay to have different networks. A lot of times we think about, I have one network. It just depends on the thing that you want to do, and you benchmark where you are. So I'll stop there, and I'll definitely hand it over to anyone else who wants to make it.
I definitely agree. And one thing I would say is make sure that the people around you know what you like and what you're capable of. And so from a selling perspective, if you have a business, your potential customers need to know what you're selling. And so from a marketing perspective, you are posting something and you're like, oh, I only have one like. But if you keep posting, people know that you are still in business. And so I would convert that to your network. Anybody that you're working with, anybody that you're friends with, talk about your interests, talk about the things that you like to do, and what you want to do. Your current job is not going to be your final role. And I think it's okay to talk about the things that you see yourself doing in the future. And that's how I've gotten some positions. So, people around me in my network were able to say, oh, didn't you say that you liked X, Y, and Z? I know that that's not your current position. So and so is hiring for X, Y, and Z. You know, you should let's have a conversation.
So for me, I'd say two things. One, I want to piggyback off of like filling the gaps in your network. So think about if you wanted to start a business as an example, and you could be really great in sales, you could be really great in marketing, but you could know that maybe you're not as strong when it comes to things like finance, like your numbers. So if you ever watch Shark Tank and you'll hear people talk about what's your cost of acquisition, what's your profit and loss numbers, like that's not always going to be a strength for everyone. So that's a gap you've identified in your network. So now you can go out and try to find someone who's skilled or more versed in that so that you can learn from them. So that's the one thing I would say about kind of plugging into that. And to Carell's point, remember you want your network to also be an advocate for you. So in order for them to be an advocate for you, they have to be really clear on what it is that you do and what your interests are. So there's a saying in the marketplace, if you confuse, you lose. So we all are multi-passionate and we all have lots of different interests. But when it comes to networking and you have a specific need or desire, you want to be very specific as to what that is so people know exactly how they can help you.
One thing I'll just add from my perspective, what's helped me is putting content out there, especially the fact that I'm in the DEI space. I've been in it before it sort of got very, very a hot commodity or whatever you want to call it. But I think working to consistently have those organic connections and have people organically find you based off your posts, find out, what's a big conversation right now when it comes to when you think about DEI, what are people talking about out there and how can you provide your unique perspective or your spin or, thoughts based on what you see in your current role or previous role. I think that's a big piece because then I have people who just follow me that I've never heard of, and that might lead to something down the line, or someone may, reach out to my inbox and say, "Oh, I'm interested in this career path. Anything you can tell me about it? I saw your recent post." And then we're having a conversation. I think that's a big piece too. Always be open on the other side to be receiving of people who want your time. You may not always have the time, but you never know how person might remember you taking time out of your day. Like it could be 2 years later, and all of a sudden they're in a position to help you find something. Maybe they have like a senior whatever position on their team. And like, I thought of you because you took the time to help me when I needed it. So make sure it's like that two-way street. You may not feel person has anything to offer you at that time, but and be wary of that. Don't do something in hopes that they help you out in the future. But I'm just saying, be open to every opportunity and every chance to connect with someone. So.
I just want to add one more thing. So years ago, when I had first gone into the podcast industry, I was invited to speak at this event. And I remember going through the list of attendees and looking for everyone who was a person of color because there weren't that many, right? So it was easy enough to look at. And then also determine like, okay, who seems like they maybe have a fit? Maybe we have something in common. So I actually found someone who also had grown up in the Bronx. And so I reached out to that person and said, hey, I'm also attending this conference. I'll be speaking. Do you have like 10 minutes or 15 minutes to get on the phone? I'd love to introduce myself to you before we get to this conference, which was going to be full of thousands of people. So I did, and we met, and she's my mentor still to this day. And so just simply by going out and trying to make that connection in a very low risk way of like, hey, we're going to be in the same space. I'd love to get to know you before we get into this gigantic room is a way that you never know what's going to come out of it. One of the best pieces of advice I'd gotten very early in my career is the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So you have to also be able to ask for what it is that you want. And that could just be a connection, a friendship, community, all of that. But the worst thing anybody could say is no.
The gems that were just shared, my goodness. Yes. I'm like, where's my notepad? I'm going to have to watch the re-record. I want to answer the question too, if that's okay. What's really interesting is I transitioned from being an accountant to being in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And in order to do that, I said to my friend, let's go to a networking event once a week. So I went on Eventbrite, I searched up networking events for Black women, and once a week I went to a random networking event. And I had to do that because in my family, I don't have people who work at Microsoft, Google, Facebook, Salesforce, SAP, Fortune 500, Expedia. I don't have those people in my family. So I had to go out and I had to meet those people. And in meeting those people, I was able to build connections where when a role came available for me, they said, okay, I'm going to refer her. And as many of you know, if you have a referral and getting a job, it's a lot better than you just applying on your own. And so through that, I was able to really leverage my net worth and get a lot more money. But then also knowing people inside companies, you can say, hey, what's the pay scale here? You can ask them ahead of time so you know what you're working with before you go into negotiations. We were all just saying earlier, you should definitely negotiate your salary at all costs, all times, never stop. Um, but something that in talking about that, I wanted to ask you all, does anyone have any questions? I want to take a break to see if anyone has any questions for everyone that just shared. Yeah.
Well, thank you all so much for the gems that you dropped so far. But I also wanted some insight on how networking is relevant to some of the steps that all of you alluded to, which is making a jump, taking a next step. Sometimes people are making jumps towards things that are not necessarily as developed. So, in terms of networking and sponsorships and getting credibility for something that you're still trying to upskill and get good at, what would you or how would you recommend we leverage something like networking when you're not fully credible yet?
if if I could jump in on that, a couple of tips is if you find people in your network, or if they're a loose tie and you see them doing things, follow their socials, comment, get curious about what they're doing. People love to talk about themselves. You know, if you show that curiosity toward the things that they're doing, then they'll start to give you those insights. And I would say the other side of it is share some stuff, try things you're doing. So it's like, whether you have the expertise or not, if you're sharing it, if you're showcasing it, getting feedback from others, it opens doors for you to have conversations with those people who look like experts or you deem as experts. And when you come at them with that approach, it's very disarming, and people tend to be a lot more open. Whereas like, hey, I just saw you on this podcast, and this was this great point that you made about this. Hey, I'm working on this thing. You have 10 minutes to talk about it. I would love to gain some insight from you. So there's no pressure. There's no really strong ask about, hey, I need a job or I need this thing. You're just curious about what they're doing, and they'll give you all the game after that.
I was just going to say also that I don't think you need to have the credibility when you first want to make an introduction with somebody, right? I think the desire and the curiosity is really enough. And to build on the point, once you go in with a specific question, right? Because you think people are getting emails all the time and they have other requests. But when you can be really specific on your ask, that makes it clear for the other person to understand, can I help them? Am I the right person to help them? And also maybe do I have the time to help them, depending on like the breadth of the ask, right? So I would say, again, never feel like you have to hesitate to reach out, because there's a bunch of people that are going to be in that industry that do that. When I gave the example before about the person in podcasting, I was very new. I taught myself how to podcast on my own. I didn't have the experience, but she was someone who saw something in me and said, hey, I want to help this person out, just by being there as a mentor. And we didn't speak all the time. We spoke maybe once a quarter. And recently she hired me to be the marketing lead for her company. And that was just basically going out there and just making this really simple introduction. I had no idea what it would become 5 years later. But even speaking so infrequently, I still stayed in her mind when she had a need for her company. So don't worry about the credibility. The credibility will come. You can still build a network at any level where you're at.
I wanted to just add one thing. I think don't worry about credibility. And I think if people tell you, like, no one knows exactly what they're doing. I'm gonna say it like that. No one knows what they're doing. And I think at every so I roll to C-suite. So it's like I report directly to CEO, CFO, COO. And the one thing that like is the common thread is they're problem solvers. So like problems are gonna continue to arise. And if you position yourself as like, I will work through this, like don't give up. And I think, I know you're saying credibility, but you're probably saying, hey, I'm new to this. How am I going to leverage a network? And I think their examples are great. So find people who are doing what you want to do and just have that conversation, open that and say, like, how did you get here? What did you do? The average person is not upskilling themselves. The average person is not reaching out like Monica is doing. I have a lot of these conversations. I ask a lot of questions. It's like I've been like that since a kid, and it's paid off because I'm not scared to talk to C-suite, and I'm in the rooms and Black girl, I'm like, yes, I'll say something because I realize no one has the perfect answer. There is no right answer. And so your voice does matter. You know what I mean? Your perspective. So I think, you know, think of it like that. Like they're just like me. No one knows exactly the best way to solve this problem.
I would also like to add that you got to remain curious, and curiosity takes you a long way. So when I was transitioning, I said, I want to be in DI because I'm passionate about it. And everyone was like, that's cute, but your passion is not enough, girl. So I stalked the heck out of my DEI team when I was working at JetBlue. I took them to coffee. If they had an event, I stayed late to help clean up. I was just constantly there showing them that I wanted it. But then also at the same time, I was volunteering with other organizations who needed pro bono work. And I said, hey, I'm a diversity, equity, and inclusion practitioner. I can do pro bono work for you. And so I started doing work for outside companies. And did I know what I was doing? Not at all. But I knew that I could figure it out. And they say that something with women that's really interesting is when we apply for jobs, we want to have 100% of the qualifications to say that we can make it. But men typically only have, especially white cisgender men, have 60% of the qualifications because they know the other 40% they can Google and figure it out. So I would say the same to you is that continue to be curious, continue to be a problem solver, as Karel said. And something that I specifically did when I first got my role was I went to my interview and I brought them a 20-page presentation. And I was like, I don't have time to go through all this, but I'd love to leave this here with you. And it allowed them the time to reflect and see what I can produce. And I took a problem that I saw that was wrong with what they were doing, and I told them how they could fix it. And then I also pulled research from like Stanford and USC and somehow tied it in there to make it sound very, collegiate. And I got the job within 24 hours. So I think that sometimes too, you just have to, similar to what Monica was saying, think about how you can approach people in a way that other people aren't doing it. Like even when I reach out to people on LinkedIn, I say, hey, I saw you wrote this really interesting article. I just had some feedback for you. And they're like, oh, wow, someone actually took the time to read what I wrote and give me feedback. Okay, cool. Let me engage with them. So just think about how you continuously provide for other people, because usually when you do that, you get something in return. Awesome question. Yeah.
The LinkedIn thing works, y'all. So do that. Exactly what she said. Oftentimes people think of success, right, when they network and they've met the right person that put them in position. But what we don't talk about is the mindset shift that has to happen earlier. So can each of you share with us what was something that you had to release in your life to get to the success where you're at today?
That's a very good one. And I want to answer from the perspective as sometimes I have to relearn things too. Like it's like that never ending process sometimes. But I think what's helped me, it even goes back to sort of what I was talking about earlier, is having something to affirm myself in terms of what have I accomplished, but then also taking it a step further and like, what are the goals that I have for myself? So let me give an example. I put myself on the scale of someone who is very introverted. So in the past, I might tell myself, oh, like, I'm not gonna really go out there and share my opinion. It doesn't really matter. Or like they probably have other people who have more insights, whatever. So like I had to let go of that frame of mind where what I had to say was not as important or was less important than someone else's. And I think for me, that comes with like setting those small goals. Like, okay, I know I have this meeting today, an all team meeting. I'm going to set this goal. I'm going to speak at least once in it. I'm going to either ask a question once. I'm either going to say an insight based on something from my previous experience, just add value in some way so they know I'm in the room, know I'm actually there to, provide a perspective. So then you can check in at the end of the month. Okay, how many times did I achieve that goal? Okay, can I ramp it up now? Should it be 2 times every team meeting or something like that? So like those small shifts is really important. So it's goal setting, but also letting go of, all right, I just label myself as someone who's more introverted, but with that label, I'm deciding to have that determine how I will communicate or how I will, engage in these forums. So let me shift that and say, no, what's the goal I can set to actually take ownership, take control, reframe, and then reclaim what do I want to do? I want to show I'm there to, I'm a valued member of this team.
That was a great answer. That was a great answer. I would say for me, it's the idea that okay is better than perfect. I think in our communities, we often hit ceilings. We have to do, twice the work for half the recognition. And once you start to move from that mindset that I can iterate and I can try stuff, this event today is the brainchild of myself and Kayvon Lee trying stuff. So it's you continue to iterate and then you learn from those experiences. And I think as you start to learn, you do one of two things. You either, if it makes sense, you persevere and you keep pushing forward. If it doesn't make sense, you pivot. But you do that from a perspective of insight and experience. And that's the best thing I think for like shifting your mindset, is that giving yourself permission to say it's okay to try stuff and moving from that idea of fearing failure. Because what people often don't recognize is that in your failures are often your biggest lessons. And if you make that shift, you can definitely start to move into these spaces of success, because there's always some benefit in what you do.
For me, and it's a great question, I think it's the idea of letting go about rejection and really like not caring about rejection. So I think about Steph Curry. Does everybody know who Steph Curry is, right? So he's one of the most famous basketball players. He's an all-time three-point shooter, and his percentage is less than 40%, which means 60% of the time he's not making the shot, right? Like he's failing that shot. But if Steph went there and decided, I'm not going to shoot threes anymore, we wouldn't even be talking about him. He wouldn't even be in the conversation, right? We think about the same thing in baseball. A successful baseball player bats 350, which means 35% of the time they're actually getting a hit or better, right? 35%, which means that 65% of the time they're not, right? So it's like, how are you redefining what rejection looks like? And just look at it like this. It can be a no, right? And that can be fine, right? It is a no. It can be a not now, or it can be setting you up for something better, right? So it's all about just kind of taking that, for me, that mindset of knowing that I'm going to put myself out there for so many different opportunities that like that one rejection isn't going to stop me from moving forward. And when you do that enough times, like it just kind of rolls off your back. And it's not to say that those things are less important or that you didn't want them, but they're not going to stop you. You're not going to stall because somebody told you no.
Can't stop, won't stop. Yes.
I love that. For me, it was removing the ceiling. So, like, I think it's important to see yourself in the roles that you eventually will be in. And how I did that was I joined a different network. Everything I used as excuses for myself to see myself in certain roles. Everybody had crazier stories or crazier backgrounds than I did. So as I said, I'm an immigrant, and everybody around me was sort of settling for what I feel is like maybe minimum of what their capacity is. And I think exposing myself to people who just accomplished crazy things, it helped me remove the ceiling and realize that like I can do anything that I want to do if I put my mind to it.
And I would say I had to let go of what other people thought. For me, I'm really close to my parents, and everything in my career was like, I'm gonna make my mom proud. I'm gonna make my daddy proud. And then I forgot, am I making myself proud? And so I had to release the thought of doing something in my career for other people and instead doing something for myself. But something else I wanted to touch on, you mentioned Gashard, measuring things. I feel like you like to measure things from my little bit of getting to know you. um, and I always say, if you can't measure it, it doesn't matter. And that's a phrase that I've stuck by my whole life. So I'm curious, what have you measured in your career to make sure, and this is for everyone, what have you measured in your career to make sure that you're achieving the success and the goals that you want to reach?
Money. Money. No, so okay, so there's a lot of groups. There's a lot of I love TikTok, y'all. There's a lot of places that you can go and check to make sure that you're being compensated correctly. So if you're a person of color, if you're a woman, if you're a man, doesn't matter. You should look and see how other people in your specific role are being compensated and then go higher, right? I think that like that's how I know, like, okay, all right, this is like how I measured like I was gonna talk in my accent, make it in a life. You know what I mean? And it's like, I'm here, I've arrived. And I think that just look at the numbers. Like the average person in New York makes X, you know what I mean? And like, what do you want to do? And I think for me, I'm talking about money a lot because the reality is we need it to live, but it unlocks so much freedom. And I think, you know, anybody of color, we have loans, we have debt. And I think it's something that you just take that away and then just like live. That's how I want to live. I want to do whatever I want to do. And that's why I push forward for the roles that I get and all the things that I do.
I just wanted to add to that, in saying that in all the folks that I've career coached and life coached in my work and then also outside of my 9 to 5 work, there are three big levers, and money is definitely one of them. Corel, I find that most people are either seeking money, some sense of meaning or impact, or some sense of creative expression. And the challenge for most people is that they misalign things. They're like, oh, you know what? I'm a great poet. I should be making $1 million as a great poet. And yeah, maybe that should be the case, but that's not real life. So I think based on where you are, especially if you're like early stage in your career, if you're of color, if you're in different socioeconomic situations, if you just got out of school, you know, when you look at those three levers, think of them like a mixing board. You know, what's gonna be a priority? I need to make money because I got debt. I have things that are driving me. But then after a while, you know, you achieve those money goals, then the other areas start to get a little louder. It's like, am I making an impact? Is this giving me meaning? And then so you start to make those changes and those pivots to dial those levers up or down, depending on where you are in your life and your career. So I say it's either money, impact, or some form of expression. Now there could be more to it, but I find those are the three things that tend to drive people.
I was just gonna add, completely agree with both of those, and I think I try to, at least something I've been trying to practice more recently is how is this sitting with me from a mental perspective, from a wellness perspective, when it comes Sunday, and some may have heard of the Sunday scaries or whatever you want to call them. Am I feeling this angst about starting the work week? Am I feeling this pressure that, you know, from my team or my environment or whatever it is? Am I feeling like this is a line from a mental perspective, or am I struggling with, you know, how it's affecting? Because mental health is going to lead to affecting your physical health. So it all connects. So you're going to need to, you know, like Kason and Carol were saying, like when you think about those aspects and when maybe they're in that fulfillment stage at the time for you, then it's like, okay, mentally, am I there as well? Like, what are my measure? And yes, I guess like Morgan said, I do like to measure things, and I try to think about like, what is something that's going to be a trigger for me to tell me I'm not mentally sound right now with this job or career path? So you need to think of those for you in advance so that you know when something's going off, an alert or something that says, actually, let me rethink how I'm approaching where I'm at, either at this company, on this team, in this, you know, field, like for example, like finance, I know a lot of people who worked in finance and have gotten burnt out just from the long hours and what you have to do there. So it's like, is that the feel for you? Is there another way you can still work if you're passionate about numbers or what have you, but not in those environments of stress? So other things to consider as well.
So the last thing I'll say is I measure time, right? So I'll ask myself, when was the last time I learned something new? That'll be a big one. When was the last time I took a vacation? When was the last time I spent more than X amount of hours with my partner? Or there's all these different, as Kassan mentioned, levers that we have. And so for me, time is a very big one. How much am I really using my time to expand? Am I growing in all the ways that I want to grow, in all the ways that I want to stretch? If I feel, for me, stagnation, I'm not a happy camper with stagnation. So if I don't get that time to really, whether it's read a book, consume podcasts, write something on my own, find an opportunity to create, then I know that I'm not living in my most aligned way.
I love all of those because some of them I don't measure and I need to, like money. I've always thought that money comes and goes, and so I never really thought about it. And it wasn't until I got later in my career where I saw my white peers making 20,000 more than me and we were doing the same thing that I was like, hold up. This is why you're going to Greece and Mykonos and all these cool places, and I'm just going to New Orleans. Like, we gotta figure this out. So I had to shift my mindset a little bit there. But another thing that I like to measure is influence. So how can I influence other people? And when I was working in the finance world, there were some interns that came in and they were all making fun of this Black girl for wearing Ruby Roo red lipstick, if anyone knows lipstick colors. And they said it's so unprofessional. I can't believe she would do that, blah, 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 blah. I went up to her and I said, hey girl, maybe you don't want to wear Ruby Roo like during work hours. Maybe you should wear it after. And she said, these people don't dictate how I dress or how I come to work or my smarts or my brains. And she taught me something in that conversation. And so moving forward, she and I made an effort and a commitment to influence other Black and brown people who were just coming up in the organization to like be true to yourself. I was the first Black person to wear my hair natural at my job. And every Black woman was like, you need to straighten your hair. And I was like, actually, I don't. And just leaving that place and seeing over half the women wear their hair natural, I was like, okay, I had some type of influence and impact here. And the influence and impact doesn't always have to be like business related. Sometimes it can be human related. Because I feel like when you have an impact on someone's life, it goes beyond just like that check at the end of the day. Any more questions?
So, Morgan, you actually kind of got me into my next question. One of the things I like seeing right now is that we have such a diversity in this panel, diversity of thought, diversity of experience. I think one of the questions I'm really curious about learning is when you acclimate in your career and you start making those moves to the C-suite, how much of your authentic self can you bring into the room? I feel like as a person of color, we tend to deal with those challenges. Do I change my hair? Do I change how I speak? Do I change how I dress? Just so I can fit in or acclimate in a room. So as you guys are in your leadership roles and entrepreneurial stages in your careers, how do you find yourselves experiencing that?
Love that question.
So specifically when I decided to go into entrepreneurship, it was to do it the way that I wanted to do it, right? So very early in my career, I straightened my hair. I sort of played that game, right? I'm also, I've been in this for a long time, right? And so it was also a different time. And now I show up exactly as I am, right? And so it takes time to actually get there. And you also have to feel like you're comfortable, though, in the sense of like who you are. Because if you go in halfway, people know that you're going in halfway. You're not fully committed to like who you are. You're kind of one toe in the water. And if someone says something, you're going to go back and straighten your hair that night and show up and look the way that they want you to look, right? So you have to have that strong sense of self, which I think comes also with time and with experience. That's one. But then also when you go into entrepreneurship, you get to show up exactly as you are. You're not representing a brand other than yourself. So the masthead behind you doesn't belong to someone else that signs your checks. You're doing that for yourself. And the beauty about entrepreneurship is you also get the opportunity to decide who you want to work with and who you want to serve. And so if someone doesn't like the way you're showing up, of how you present, the clothes that you wear, your hairstyle, makeup, no makeup, kicks, heels, whatever that is, then that person really isn't wasn't for you, right? And that's a hard decision to make. And it comes with a lot of reconciling that has to happen within you. Because when you're starting your business, the first thing is protect the profit or make the profit if you haven't generated anything. But the longer you're true to yourself and the more you stay grounded in your sense of self, it will only serve you as you move forward.
That's a great answer. And to add to what you're saying, Monica, like at the end of the day, know your why. You know, C-suite. Some people think about like that's a goal. And it's like if you're not building your own dream, you're working to build someone else's dream. So there's no wrong way to approach it. You know, you can have the aspiration to get in the room, but understand why you want to be in the room. Are you trying to earn a seat at the table and work at their table? Are you looking to build your own table and just get your at-bats and understand, you know, how these things work? I think once you have an understanding of your why toward those movements, then you can align yourself into everything she said. It's about your holistic self and knowing where you have opportunities to push and pull. So the beauty of entrepreneurship and experimenting and trying stuff is that in your main thing, you know, you may not be able to pull certain levers, but in the thing that's about you, for you, about who you serve, you can now express those other elements. So I look at every opportunity as a way to create that awareness for yourself and how far you want to go.
I think something you said in your question is so important is diversity in thought. And so as I'm learning more about diversity, which there's experts here in the audience as well as on the panel, diversity is thought, is background, is socioeconomic, is a lot of different things. And so when I'm in these rooms and, you know, on my way to the C-suite, I think about that where I try to show up as my most authentic self because I'm a diverse thought, you know, like my thoughts matter and I can't conform to everybody because then we're going to keep having the same sort of like, you know, the same outcomes. You get what I'm saying? And so I think that I chose a role like currently, and I try to choose roles that I feel comfortable and my voice is heard. But I think, yes, it's something that I think through and navigate. Even my thoughts, something that Morgan just said about the Ruby Woo lipstick. And I think through some of the people of color that I've worked with in the past, and I'm like, ooh, girl, you are a do-rag to work. You know, and I'm like, should I say something? And I'm like, whatever. Why? Like, she showed up, and is that affecting her role? Like, is that affecting her work? Why am I sitting here saying something to her? So I didn't, but I think that's also diversity. You know, she was like, I have a concert later. I want to keep my hair like in a, you know, a doobie or whatever she wanted to do. And I don't know, you know, you guys know what I mean. But like, she wanted to keep it tight, you know, like, you know, she wanted to keep it right before her concert after work. So does that matter what's on her head? And so I think about, I have to show up as my authentic self because then the people that come after me, you know, like there's going to be other girls with head wraps on or different types of clothes. And I think that's a part of the diversity that needs to have a seat at the table in thought.
It's interesting because sometimes when I think about that, I think it can end up being like a balancing act of what makes sense even in that moment or on your journey or, you know, as you discover yourself, and it may change. And I think as almost like taking a step back, it goes back to what is your outlet? What does your safe space look like for, let's say you do, you know, you can do everything to try to assimilate and someone can still say a microaggression or still can exclude you. So what's your outlet and what are you doing to make sure you have a safe space? I can think back to times where, you know, at previous companies I worked for, something happened on a team, let's say an act of exclusion, and we came together as an ERG, a Black ERG specifically, and thought, okay, what are some of the changes we can do right now in our power? It started with a town hall across the company, but it led to including diversity goals for leaders, which cascaded down to their team. So even something like a small thing, it goes back to, okay, if you have an outlet, you can almost foster change through that community that you have. So it's like a tangent to your question, but also to say, uh, you don't know how assimilating or standing out will still have an impact based on how other people perceive you. Like, I think unfortunately people are still going to end up having their stereotypes or having their perceptions, which is just the unfortunate truth right now. But then we have to say, okay, what can we still do that's in our power?
We only have a few minutes left, but I would like to add, my daddy always told me, don't hate the player, hate the game. And when I say that, what I mean is like, I don't need to go into a space where I have to hate myself, where I can't be myself. And if I'm in a space where I have to hate myself in order to fit in there, then maybe it's not the space for me. And that's different for everybody. Like, I have some friends who to this day, they still straighten their hair. And I'm like, girl, you're gonna get this fro. Like, it is what it is. And if a company doesn't want me for that, then that's on them. But another thing is, as you move up in the C-suite, it becomes very political. And I think that you have to decide, do I want to deal with the politics? And do also, I ask myself from this political standpoint, who am I? Am I Obama? Am I Trump? Am I Biden? Am I Bush? I'm just thinking about the presidents that I can remember. And they all had different impacts of influence. You know, some influenced ignorance and some influenced change and hope. And so, how am I making an influence in the organization when it comes to a political standpoint? And if I'm not making an impact and I'm fighting, and no one's listening, I need to go. I think that sometimes we hold on too long because we want to make it to that C-suite position, but there's so many positions out there that it doesn't mean that that one company is a place that you have to stay, especially if they make you hate yourself. I'm not saying that you do, but do we have any? Yeah.
All right. Each of you shared some amazing stories today and shared wonderful gems with us. So I would like to know what in your stories, right, in the next chapter of your lives, what is the title and why?
Fancy question.
GM. This is a very good question. I'm a marketing director, but I'm over a mini business within a bigger business. And that means I look at profit and losses, I look at growth opportunities. So I'm a growth marketer. And what I want to do is manage all things of the business. So operations, hiring, and then other mini businesses within that one. So why? I think it'll give me bigger exposure. I've had a few businesses of my own on my own money. So like all the losses were on me in my pockets and all the gains were on me for sure. But and when my boss hired me, she was like, Corel, let's try this with other people's money. You know, when we get partnerships and investments. So now I want to generally manage a mini business with other people's money. So anything I lose, it's a loss for sure, but it's not on me. And I think it'll help set me up for sort of that C-suite mentality.
My answer would be, if it's a catchphrase, it would be the idea of design for life. So what I mean by that is, from a professional work standpoint, it's helping organizations become skill-based organizations. So democratizing the idea of roles and titles and really looking at the talent and what people can do to make them sustainable. So that's where I'm going from a leadership perspective and designing those facets for organizations. On the flip side of that coin of design for life, it's thinking about individuals and what kinds of skills do they need to move forward in this world that we're in today. Because as I said in my presentation, the only constant is change. So it's not about having all the right skills right now, but it's having the mindset and having a tool set to know that, hey, when the temperature changes, when the market changes, I know what I need to do to make moves to figure out what's next. Because if you're first in line to do that, then you'll always be forever employable and you'll always thrive in whatever you do.
I'll say that right now I'm a manager of diversity, equity, and inclusion, but I'd say it's almost like adding to what I consider my title, and being a DEI consultant is something that's important to me. So leveraging everything I've learned already, and how can I then influence companies, external them from my own, because as you can imagine, with all these companies that have popped up with these DEI roles and these DEI councils or whatever the case may be, not all of them had the strategy behind it or the thought of what are they actually wanting to accomplish. How does it connect to like the business and business goals, what have you. So I think just having that uh, expanding of my frame of influence and what I can say I've strategically had an impact on, I'd say.
For me, it would be legacy. So I've lived, I feel like 1,000 lifetimes sometimes. I had a pretty tumultuous upbringing. So I lost my family by the time I was 23. And so I spent a lot of my career in the beginning stages just really trying to survive. And I prayed a lot to walk in the purpose that was meant for myself. And now that I feel like I'm walking in that purpose, I think of legacy so that everything I do, I can be of service to other people, whether it's planting a thought, an idea, an inspiration, an actual strategy. How can I influence my niece, who is not my bio niece, but it feels like she is? And I think about that all the time. What is the legacy that I'm going to leave, and how will I be remembered? And that's how the intentionality that I use to approach the next steps in my career.
I would say I would title mine Finding Self. I think I'm in a stage in my career where I pivoted again. So now I do fashion event production, and I love it. But I also think it's challenging me to find out more parts of myself and who I am. And we were talking about this earlier, Kason and I, about how people take their work and their life and they kind of go down two separate paths. But if you really want to like holistically have a comfortable life, your work and your life need to connect, you know? And they need to connect in a way, something that Gashard said as well earlier from a mental health perspective. I've been in some work situations where my mental health was not all together. And I had to pull it together, but I don't want to live a life of pulling it together. I want to live a life that I get excited to go to work. I get excited to make an impact, to make an influence, and to make a change. So I would say finding self. I think I'm just still trying to discover what I want for my future, and I think that's okay. Thank you.
It is okay.
The last question I want to ask before we close out is if you could give everyone here, Kason, something you talked about in your presentation earlier today was accelerating, right? So what piece of advice could y'all give to everyone here on how to accelerate within their careers and how to move up in the C-suite?
I'm happy to kick that off is know your why and know where you are right now. A lot of people shoot for goals, but they don't really understand where they are. So they're shooting for targets and not knowing the pieces of what's missing in order to get there. So if you do that intentional work to cast a vision for yourself to the point that you reinforced again, Morgan, to understand what are your work values, what are your life values, and how to bring those things more holistically together, whatever it is, you're going to be a lot more productive and you're going to accelerate because you're going to stick to those things because you're creating alignment based on you, not based on ideas that are outside of you.
I would say, I guess it's almost twofold. I'd say be prepared before the opportunity presents itself. I think a lot of the times we're waiting for the opportunity to then say, okay, I'm going to get ready for this. Now I'm going to like work up to that. No, you have to do that background. No one's going to see all the hours you put in and everything you put in to actually prep yourself from what you're reading, what you spend your time on the weekend doing, you know, who you're talking to. What are those hours when maybe someone else isn't prepping that you can take advantage of and, you know, make sure you're ready when something presents itself. And I'd say also when it does arrive, even if it's not aligned, be memorable. Find a way to be memorable for the right reasons, because I've had interviews in the past as examples that maybe when I learned more about that particular role, it didn't end up being a good fit. But because I did the prep, the background work, that person remembered me and remembered how I spoke about my field and what I did, you know, to from building out a website and building out certain things to show I'm invested in this field and this practice, to then say, you know, come back to me. This is like a year later and say, hey, we have a different role that opened up that seems more aligned to what you want to do. And that was because you know, I was honestly shocked at the time because that was the first time it happened where someone like reached out after not talking for a while. But apparently I had some impact and I was, you know, memorable to that person. So I'd say find your way to, you know, be impactful.
I would say define what sweet means to you. So in some instances, it can be the C-suite. In others, it could be a suite at Madison Square Garden. It could be the suite that you decide to reserve when you go on your next vacation, or it could just be the sweet life that you create for yourself. So have that self-definition of what sweet means to you, because it doesn't have to look for you the way that it might look for some of us. You get to decide what you want that to be.
I would say stay open. I think a lot of things have come to me and I'm like, oh, this doesn't look and feel right. But I think you just stay open. I learn from anyone, from a 5-year-old, from 55-year-olds. And I think that has helped me a lot. So in work positions, I try to listen a lot more than I'm speaking because a lot of people have things that they can teach you. So I try to stay open to that.
And finally, I would say research. If you're trying to become the next TikTok star, you better watch TikTok every day and research the heck out of it. Think big, y'all. I I think that when it comes to anything like doing your research, I try to read at least 3 memoirs a year because I like to read people's stories to see how they got to where they were and to learn from them, which is something I think everyone kind of touched on, learning in general. So I would say learning and research. But thank you all for joining us today. Thank you, Kason, so much for putting this together. And Kayvon, thank you so much. Y'all are amazing. Pop it up. And if you want to learn more, stay tuned into From Streets to Suites in general. There's going to be more events coming up in the future. If not, I will make sure there are, and I'll bully you, Kason, to make sure that you have more. But thank you all so much for coming today, and I hope you have a good rest of your weekend.